back to our YouTube channel, and we're discussing generative AI, and today we're going to discuss about the project lifecycle. So we've already talked about the basics of Gen AI, applications of Gen AI, how Gen AI is different from AI itself, and how generative AI has evolved through these years, right? So let's now talk about what the project lifecycle would be like. Okay, what are all these processes and steps involved in Gen AI? So let's first talk about planning and conceptualizing, right? The most important thing is trying to identify the business problem and the opportunity where generative AI can actually provide a unique solution, right? So this is a pretty important step because just because you want to use these fancy terms of generative AI and these concepts doesn't mean you're going to suggest this solution to every other business problem, right? So it is very important to identify a perfect business problem where this concept fits in. And we will basically, start with a clear motto or a vision for our project. And we'll define what is the scope, like exactly what generative AI is going to solve, and what are the ethical considerations where, if we are collecting any data, public data, where the legalities of all of that. And at the same time, limitations and restrictions, right? Not everything can be solved by generative AI. So we will be trying to understand what exactly the business goals are and aligning our concept with the same. Then we will develop a plan, okay, including all the challenges that we're going to face, all the milestones, okay, what are the different resources, tools required, and how we are going to, strategize the entire project so that we can come out risk-free and keep it as smooth as possible, right? So next comes identifying our goals and scope. We will clearly identify exactly what are the goals that generative AI can achieve and what generative AI cannot be achieved. So at this point, we're basically doing a lot of research, okay? And this research also will include acquiring a lot of business knowledge on this business domain that you're going to solve. Okay, what are the quantifiable metrics? And also define the clear success criteria beforehand. And we also determine the boundaries of our project. So we are going to prioritize what is important, what are the features and functionalities that generative AI can actually improve, and how do we avoid falling into certain pitfalls, which generative AI cannot do better than any other human being, right? So these kind of things we'll be defining. And yes, thorough research. And when I say research, certified research. So we'll be looking through articles. We'll be looking into a lot of Sci-Hub articles, ResearchGate articles, the different good journals that are there with high impact factors. We'll be looking into research articles of those, trying to find out whom you can actually rely on, right? Who are the potential collaborators? What kind of insights we can get? So this is a very important step. If you feel that this business problem that you're facing has been solved before, you can always take that as a reference, and probably the accuracy or the goals that they have achieved, we can set that as a benchmark and move forward. So this will immensely benefit the client as well at the end of the day, to understand what all kind of problems his competitors are facing and what kind of problems genuinely exist in the industry, and what can and cannot be solved by generative AI. So we're basically removing the illusion of the customer and showing him a clear picture, right? Okay, then we do a lot of feasibility analysis. We're basically looking into what will be the quality of data, whether data will be available or not, okay, in the first place. And if data is available, what kind of quality of data is available? And if data is not available, we usually go out there, conduct a lot of surveys, or try to gather public data itself, collect the data itself. So we'll be defining these kind of parameters, right? So we're always concerned about where are we going to get the data from? And is the data going to be enough? Is it enough to train a model? That's again another question, right? So we're evaluating the computational resources which we need for training and deployment. So we're considering whether we can get this data from a public resource. And if we do, is it of a good quality? And can I feed it into cloud and store it there? And then sort of use some specialized cloud platforms to execute our project, or do we need some sort of hardware? Because all of these things will again, revise the budget of the project itself, right? If you are investing in a lot of cloud storage platforms, or for executing your code itself, if you're going towards a cloud platform, then we also need to ensure that maybe your hardware also is supporting, right? There are no dependencies, etc. So all of these is going to basically revise the budget, and it's our job to sort of find a middle ground where we can ensure efficiency, and at the same time we work within the business constraint of not charging too much to the client. Yes, and we identify the personnel with necessary expertise. So selecting the right kind of team who has an open mind, who has, at least the knowledge of AI, can start with these kind of models, and building a strong team. So probably when you're delegating the work, right? If you have a team member who's good at probably traditional data science, maybe a team member is good at AI models, maybe a team member who has extensively worked only on the deployment part, okay, front end part. I think you should take a team which is a complete mixture of all these people, so that you can perform this stint without any glitch, right? Then when it comes to the development process, so we're basically crafting different kind of prompts, okay, and a lot of different prompting styles are there. One shot prompting, a lot of zero shot prompting, right? Different prompts available. So someone who has a bit of knowledge of this, we can start with that, right? We're experimenting with different types of formats and styles, and basically keep on experimenting so that you reach a better goal at the end of the day. Then choosing appropriate pre-trained models. This is the most important. If you do not have enough knowledge on AI or generative AI, you might end up choosing a wrong model for certain kind of data, right? So if at all pre-trained models are not available and they're not working out, maybe you have to design your own model by considering a lot of factors, right? Whether it's actually going to perform the task or not, whether the speed, okay, the performance is going to be good, whether the accuracy will be maintained, whether there are any extra computational requirements. Okay, so these kind of things need to be put in picture. And yes, if you have enough knowledge about the pre-trained models available, like GPT-3, all the publicly available models, maybe you can Llama 2 and all of these, maybe publicly available models can be used, and then you can sort of build your solution on it rather than starting from scratch and designing your own model. So always that's basic, and also that's going to save you a lot of time, right? If you start with a pre-trained model in the first place. So these kind of things will be involved, a lot of back and forth discussions genuinely between the managers and the client, and what is the budget, what kind of things can be done. So it's usually a very experimental process, because again, remember, generative AI is just developing, is at a developing stage now, right? It's not an purely established sort of a domain. So we're still exploring. So whenever it's in the development stage or exploring stage, there will be a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into. So these kind of things happen. And at the end of the day, we're basically trying to achieve the best result, best accuracy, and a better performance. So fine-tuning our model with some selected data in order to achieve optimal results. So it's very, very important to first start off with good quality data. Good quality data means data which is not biased, data which is almost free of errors, and there is some integrity to that data. So that will efficiently help you, go ahead with your analysis, and your analysis results will actually make sense. And then when you further build on for prediction and model training and etc., I think better quality data is something we need to focus on, right? Okay, then embracing an iterative approach, right? Continuously testing, evaluating more models, refining your model. So let's say you've tested 7 to 8 models and you find that 3 models are giving you the best kind of accuracy and performance. You need to go back, fine tune them, right? Fine tune them to perfection. A lot of experimentation will be involved. So going back and forth, this is basically a very agile process, and you need to keep adapting to how the model behaves and changes. So we need to basically ensure that we're continuously improving for the sake of the client. And then Yes, of course, the data collection and preparation. So we're going to again emphasize on the focus of collecting high quality data. When I mean high quality data, what I mean is coming from the right resource, a reliable resource, okay, and maintaining integrity in the data, not many missing values, not a questionable kind of data. Okay, not many duplicacies, redundancy in the data. There should be some consistency in the data. So all of this, and at the same time, collecting the relevant data, right? Your variable of interest, which is going to focus on your analysis, right? That aligns with what you are trying to analyze. So all this will, ensure that your quality of data is good. And if the quality of data is good, you're basically addressing the bias, right? So without bias, if you start off, obviously you will end up building a good accuracy model. And at the same time, when we're pre-processing our data, we ensure that we remove noise and any inconsistency, any randomness in the data, right? So it's very important, especially if you're probably doing image detection or object detection projects. Annotating it's a pretty tedious and mundane task, but a necessary one after all. So annotating properly will basically then, to what precision you annotate the images is going to decide how good your model performs later on, right? And then establishing a system for acquiring and integrating new data over time. So as and when, let's say you've built a model, you have taken the data and probably integrating new data as it comes in, because right now we are in the day and age where, we're using so many apps and a lot of big data is being generated and stored. So I think dynamically you need to build models which will dynamically adapt to these kind of changes happening around and changes happening in the data. Pretty important, right? So if you start off with a good quality data and the pre-processing is in place, I think we're good to build models, right? So let's talk about model selection and training. Before jumping into what all different models are available, again, we need to take a step back, go back to the square one, and sort of revise what are the specific goals that we defined. Are we actually aiming for a of what kind of a thing are we aiming for? Are we trying to write a story? Are we trying to generate images? Are we trying to generate videos? Are we trying to generate some music? Right? What kind of project we're trying to achieve? What kind of goal we're trying to achieve at the end of the day? What is the problem that we're solving? Right? So different tasks, different things will demand different architectures and strengths. Like I showed you the demonstration before, that we had Chat GPT, which is an LLM. Then again, Gemini is also an LLM, right? But again, if I want to start integrating music, creating a different music and all of that, I need to go to some other library, some other models like Soundful, etc., right? DALI and all of this. So I think we need to select the models which are expertise in that area itself, right? So consider the trade-offs between leveraging a pre-trained model like GANs and VAs, right? And building your own. So when compared to these automation encoders and all this, right? Leveraging probably a pre-trained model will have its own limitations. So again, this is a trade-off. You need to know what kind of timelines you have in place, right? Do you actually have the time and that level of expertise in your team who can start building a model from the scratch? Or are you going to leverage whatever is already available to you, right? This is very important to assess. Pre-trained models offer a head start in the performance, but it might require a lot of fine-tuning because performing to your specific data might not be the case all the time, right? So while building from scratch, probably you'll have greater control. But yes, a higher expertise, a higher code level expertise, technical expertise comes into picture, and it will probably end up taking a lot of time. So this is something that you need to bargain beforehand with the client, and the kind of project or what you're aiming for entirely depends on that, right? Then yes, obviously gathering high quality data, diverse data, okay, because we don't want to make a biased model and make a fool of ourselves at the end of the day, right? So addressing a lot of biases, being fair in data collection, avoiding a lot of errors, right? Random errors, systematic errors, errors of exclusion, occlusion, all of these we need to take care of, right? And ensuring that data is clean, okay? organized data, basically, a structured data, right? So this kind of things need to be kept in check. So apart from that, we will also start with, once we know that, these are the kind of models that we're going to use, and we have gathered our data successfully, a good quality data, and we're happy with it, we're going to start with a pre-training approach. And then once the pre-training approach is done, we will start fine-tuning whichever model is giving us a better kind of results. And continuously, we are going to monitor how the models perform with different types of data sets, right? And even if you bring in some data wherein the modifications are there, or trend is changing, ever evolving data, does this model still perform well? These are the things that you need to ask and experiment with, right? And sort of maybe adjust the hyperparameters, do a lot of tuning to get the best results possible. And yes, we definitely have to strike a balance between overfitting and underfitting of data. Wherein, let's say that some model is trying to, performing excellently well on trained data, but when it comes to test data, it's unable to generalize for the unknown data. These kind of problems do exist, and very often we'll face them. So again, whenever you're facing this, you need to go back, probably fine-tune your models again, try to see the exact quality of data, do a check on the quality of data, validation. Okay, all of these needs to be done. You can apply a lot of regularization techniques, hyperparameter tuning, okay, and find some middle ground to achieve this balance and actually end up with a good fitting model. So all of this is pretty experimentational again, because again, generative AI is still at a very developmental phase. And, you can see it as a boon or a curse, but we need to deal with it, right? So model selection and training is basically a very experimental, repetitive, and iterative process. A lot of patience is required, a lot of analysis, okay, problem solving, perseverance needs to be there, and experimenting. And the more you experiment, the more you'll end up with a good model, right? Deployment and integration. Finally, when we know that our model is performing really well, we later on go to the stage of deploying our models. Deploying means to essentially take the solution that you've built, and in a very layman's term, deployment means to take the solution that you've built and test it in a production environment for the client. So seamlessly integrating your Gen AI model into the existing infrastructure of the client itself, right? Or developing an application for it. You can develop a web-based application, right? Different things that you can do. So, and this will also ensure that, the solution to the client is given, and client is also able to access the kind of, technical expertise that you have tried to display, right? It translates into some meaningful insight, which is ultimately going to help the client, right? Whether be it helping the client in getting him better code or solving some sort of problems, any problem that you take up, right? Maybe generating music or new stories altogether, writing new scripts altogether. Whatever the solution may be, we're trying to ensure that it is deployed in a very smooth way. It is put into action in a very smooth way. And yes, this building your applications and putting it in a good infrastructure, technological infrastructure, will ensure that his client's data is secure, okay? And you're basically safeguarding his privacy, right? So this is a very high priority. And designing our architecture in such a way that he can basically scale this solution to a greater level in the future. So whenever the data is changing, whenever his business is expanding, we need to think of it on a larger scale. We need to have that far vision that client is eventually going to scale his data, scale his business. So how your same solution, Gen AI solution, is going to solve this for him, right? So we need to create a viable solution, develop a viable solution, establish very good, deployment and integration environment, so that he trusts you enough and goes forward with it, right? So these kind of things, because generative AI is assuring all of these things, that's the only reason that is growing in demand. And implementing AI solutions ultimately in real-time scenarios, you can consider how users will interact with Gen AI. how you can make it easier and understandable to someone who's not coming from a technical background. Okay, someone who can, I mean, even probably build a GenAI solution to, make even a 5-year-old understand it, right? So designing intuitive interfaces and which ensures like, clear communication, right? What all is possible and what is not possible. So probably customizing a lot of error messages, customizing a lot of things within your model itself, uh, basically coding it to such a finesse that a person who's non-technical and who's a user is basically benefiting from it, right? End of the day. Then at the same time, developing mechanisms in your model which will help them take a good decision. Because ultimately, what GenAI can do is suggest what is to be done. But the decision again ultimately lies in the hands of the stakeholder, in the hands of the business provider, right? So if you build that kind of transparency between your model and the client, I think that will really boost your role as a data scientist there, and it basically empowers the responsible application of a generative AI. And yes, we need to be completely aware of the potential biases that generative AI can cause, and what are the implications of this Gen AI solution, right? So, is it ethical? Is it non-ethical? Right? We need to go take a step back and think of these things. So, if you're basically picking up data from public platforms and you're not mindful of the fact that you're invading privacy and you don't have these permissions in check or in place, it will later on, cause a point of contention, right? So, in order to avoid these things and getting into pervasive legal lawsuits, I think all of this can be avoided if we are mindful enough to consider these kind of societal implications of what your data or your GenAI solution can impact. Implementing safeguards in order to reduce the risks, okay, and ultimately being responsible in development and deployment. Again, when it comes to probably exposing your Gen AI or data to some sort of demographic of people, right? Need to be mindful that you're not offending your certain demographic, right? For example, Google is a search engine which anybody can have an access to. Anybody who has an internet or a device can have an access to a Google search engine. Such is your generative AI solutions also. Anybody who has who can create an account, who has already an email account, can go and sign up with ChatGPT or Gemini and ask any kind of question, right? So we need to, keep our ethics into place. Keep a check on that, probably safeguard that, especially, there could be, these kind of things can also generate pervasive results, pervasive responses. So how do we sort of safeguard our demographic? How do we sort of safeguard our minors? These things need to be asked, right? These are all again up for discussion, arguments, many inputs involved. And ultimately, when you know that you're basically keeping all your ethics in place and you've integrated your deployment solution, etc., we're going to look over, monitor, and maintain, right? So monitoring and maintaining our models. We need to continuously monitor, consistently also monitor our models' performance in real world scenarios. So maybe let's say we've collected some dummy data or generated data, and now sort of cross-checking, trying to understand, is it actually performing well? Is it raising any potential issues, right? Beforehand, so that we can ensure optimal performance of our model. Then using a version control system in order to monitor these modifications. Probably every time, new data comes in or new sort of trend is being seen in the data, making sure that these models are seamlessly adapting to these things, pretty important, right? And keeping up with most recent security patches, vulnerabilities, and shielding your data from it. Could be possible because client data is super sensitive, right? Evaluation and iteration, utilizing predefined evaluation metrics. So there are a lot of predefined evaluation metrics which can help you understand whether your Gen AI model is performing well or not, and taking a lot of valuable feedback and all of that, and further improving and building on your model, right? Embracing a mindset that generative AI is still developing. It's in a very developmental phase, so you need to keep an open mind and sort of experiment a lot more. And yes, obviously base model adjustments will be happening because your evaluation metrics will always take you back, push you further, right? So take it as a benchmark, be sportive about it, right? And adopting a flexible and adaptive development process, which will embrace a lot of experimentation, iteration. So there is no correct as right or wrong, a lot of iteration and going back and down. So it's a cyclic process, is what I would say. It's not a chronological order, but it's a cyclic process, right? So at the end of the day, after evaluating, maybe you find that something is not right. Maybe you'll have to go back to your pre-processing stage itself, right? Pre-training of the data. Again, what are the success metrics? You can track your accuracy, precision, recall, right? All of these technical things. And looking into the deep diving and scrutinizing the quality of your outputs being generated and how the client itself feels about them, right? Then conduct a lot of user testing, whatever UI you have built, right? Whether it is actually useful and easy to use for someone who's non-technical, right? Because client is always going to be a non-technical person, and sort of taking their criticism, their genuine criticism, constructive criticism, collecting their feedback, and sort of pondering on that, right? Building on that. So look beyond these metrics and focus on the overall impact of your project. Is it actually starting with a good intention, and have you taken care of all the ethics, or is it going to lead to any point of contention? How is it adding any value to the business owner? This needs to be questioned at every single stage, right? Okay, and yes, there is a lot of scope for continuous improvement. We're basically starting a team which is working on this, right? A personnel, everybody comes in with their own expertise. So you need to be aware of the fact that, we're going to take the constructive criticism and probably go back to the data, go back to each and every stage of our model and sort of iterate an experimentation process, even up till the integration part, right? And encouraging innovation, exploring new techniques, ensemble learning, transfer learning, reinforcement learning, right? All of these is pretty important. And yes, being aware of what are the latest advancements that happen, probably subscribe to a lot of Gen AI magazines, okay, research articles, which are going to alert you on different innovations that are taking place. So you need to keep abreast of all of these things. And yes, incorporating these new technologies, if something is going to save the money of the client and ultimately solve your business problem without a hassle, I think that's a great thing to embrace, right? Yes, so like CR7 says, winning, that's the most important thing to me. So it's as simple as that. So, but yes, winning is the most important thing. Let's not forget about ethics also, right? While training your Gen AI model. I'll see you next session, guys. So this is it. We'll continue our discussion next week for generative AI. Please stay tuned. Join us next week as well. If you like this video, like, share, and subscribe.